Hello friends, this is Carrie and welcome back to I Like Reddit channel. I hope you all are staying safe and healthy. Friends, today we have 3 stories out of the Entitled Parent subreddit. Let's begin. Our first story is posted by Brandy Aiden Love. Update: Entitled Mother, Entitled Grandmother attempted to kill group home residents. Part 2, questions answered. The first thing to address, it was brought up about having so many people in an area having disabilities and being in a group home. The person retracted their statement about me being a liar, but I still wanted to address it. In the 1980s, people started to realize that state-run, or for lack of a better term, mental institutions, had not been a good thing, and they started investigating and shutting them down. My state, always being at least a decade behind, didn't step in until the mid-90s. From around 1995 to 2005, 3 state-run institutions were shut down. That left hundreds of people with extreme developmental disabilities and severe physical disabilities without a place to live. Many of these people had been institutionalized since infancy. They were not cared for. They were locked up like animals, treated as lab rats, abused, and neglected. Very few received any education beyond feeding themselves. Basically, they were shoveling food in their mouths and swallowing before the next person came and stole their tray. Those that had cognitive and physical ability to learn and work were used almost as slaves, working in farm fields, dishwashers, and laundry. When the state shut these institutions down, hundreds of places popped up, buying homes, apartment buildings, hotels and warehouses, etc., to be converted into homes for these people. Many families came forward claiming they didn't know what they were sending their family members to when having them committed. Many came forward stating that the state never gave them a chance to raise their family member, they just took them, placing them in these institutions. So it was a case-by-case basis of what contact family was allowed to have. This led to very strict rules of no visitation in the main house. Not only was it for the privacy of the other residents, but for the safety of both residents and visitors. There could be uncontrollable violence at any given time. This could be self-harm or directed at others. There could be nudity at any given time. There could be inappropriate, intimate behavior. As staff, we were trained to expect how to deal with it. But could you imagine a visitor seeing any of these behaviors out of the clear blue? Especially if it were the case of entitled mother and entitled grandmother, such as Kyle's, or if they brought young children. Also, if it were violence, now we would not only have 5 residents and staff to protect, but the visitors. Moving on to the most asked question about the exit door and what they did to it, we were only told that it was an explosive device. Yes, it was meant to take out staff because they assumed at least one staff member would exit first. They assumed that Kyle would be one of the last out due to the fact that he had a twisted leg, making him move slower. Had Kyle been with us, we would have used that exit. He would have been at the front of the group starting out because his slow pace would have put him at the back by the time we reached the front of the house. Yes, I thank God our office door was a designated emergency exit due to the keys being kept in there, but also for the fact that someone's foresight on wherever the placing of the shed on the side of the door, which kept the door hidden. I was also asked if there were any good families. There were so many loving families. One came to mind about a mother who was divorced from a father. He had been given custody and he was the culprit of abuse. The father was embarrassed to have a fathered a child that was obviously slow. Instead of giving him back to the mother, he had the child committed to an institution. When she was contacted to be informed of her son being moved into one of our homes, she begged for a chance to at least see him once. This turned out to be one of our most heartwarming cases. She came daily, rain, shine, snow, whatever, to visit him. She was unable to have him because she herself was in a retirement/nursing home. She actually moved to another facility to be closer to him. She bought a car and learned to drive at the age of 72 so that she could be there daily for her son, since she was unable to for nearly 30 years. Sadly, he got pneumonia about 5 years after they reconnected and he passed. She passed away about a month later. Finally, the sentence they got. Due to the already negative impression, our company and the state wanted to keep this all hush-hush as possible. They wanted it over and done with and swept under the rug. There was very little media coverage, only our local newspaper, and the story was very vague, only that there was a fire and the residents and staff were safe. It did say it was under investigation, but never any real follow-up. So a plea deal was struck, and in exchange for full confessions, most of the charges were dropped. They were not allowed any further contact with Kyle, ever. One of the men was a relative of the entitled mother through marriage, and the other was his friend. They both had prior convictions and quickly took deals, throwing the entitled mother and the entitled grandmother under the bus as it being their idea, and they had only been there to provide muscle to protect the entitled mother and entitled grandmother in case we, the staff, turned against them. They said that the entitled mother had convinced them that Kyle was being abused by staff and they only wanted to help save him. The entitled mother and entitled grandmother resisted until they were told that they would probably spend the rest of their lives behind bars if it went to trial and they lost. That was the last I had heard from them when our director told us the outcome. If you're enjoying the content so far, please put a heart emoji in the comments section down below. Our next story is posted by Time Caterpillar 24. Entitled Mother-in-Law demands a paternity test and then tries to kidnap the baby. This is my sister's story. Please excuse the language. English is not my first language. My sister and her husband were together for 5 years before they got married in 2016. Within a month of their marriage, my sister found out that she was expecting. She told very few people around her. Her mother-in-law was not one of them. When she was about 12 weeks along, she finally felt secure enough to announce her pregnancy to everyone else. Entitlement incident number 1. Entitled mother-in-law started crying and everyone else around her was celebrating. My sister announced during a family lunch between our families. The only ones who knew were me, my parents, her husband, and brother-in-law. My sister's in-laws and brother-in-law's siblings were just finding out. My sister had not wanted to share the news because she was worried about miscarrying. However, when her mother-in-law saw my parents and I smiling and not being surprised, she started bawling, screaming that my sister ruined her experience of finding out about her grandbaby by not telling her as soon as she found out. She was angry about the fact that my sister shared the news with us, her literal flesh and blood, over her. This led to entitlement instance number 2. Now, since mother-in-law felt excluded, she made sure she was included from that point onward, throwing a baby shower much before my sister wanted to. Decor and arrangements, guest lists, and invites were all done without as much as a consultation from my sister, inviting mostly mother-in-law's side of the family and not ours, forcing my sister to let her be present at each prenatal check and scan, moving into the house with my sister and brother-in-law to help take care of her baby, trying to control what and how much my sister ate, including throwing out essential medication prescribed to her and arguing against my sister's nutritionist who made her a very extensive meal plan for her. Finally, brother-in-law and sister had enough. They asked her to move out and not stick her nose into everything that was not her concern. Now, mind you, my brother-in-law is a big softie and a mama's boy, but he will stand up for his wife. This led to penultimate situation, entitlement number 3. Mother-in-law lost it. How could her baby boy throw her out of the house? She decided that it must be because my sister is a manipulative witch. Somehow, this string of thoughts landed her to presume that the baby could not be brother-in-law's because brother-in-law wanted to wait until marriage to have intimacy with my sister, and she got pregnant way too soon. So mother-in-law went around spreading gossip and rumors everywhere to anyone stupid enough to listen to her. She went from calling my sister's unborn baby to her baby, and now calling it every other name under the sun. Devil child, results of cheating, and whatnot. Then she started demanding that she needed to see proof of paternity, otherwise she would cut the child, my sister, off from the family and never speak to her son again if he would not condemn his wife's behavior. She was also convinced my family knew of her pregnancy before her, and we must have known that she cheated and deceptively got her to marry brother-in-law to hide that fact. They, again, had enough, and this went on until she gave birth. My sister and brother-in-law went low contact with mother-in-law for months, pre- and postpartum. Around the time that the baby was 5 months old, mother-in-law apologized and stated that she wanted access to her baby again. Sister and brother-in-law were skeptical, but they agreed for supervised visits only, and only if mother-in-law was constantly accompanied by my sister or brother-in-law. Mother-in-law did not like this. She once again threw a tantrum over how her son was corrupted by his evil wife, and her darling son would never do something like this to his mother. She again brought up paternity and called brother-in-law blind and an idiot for letting some common hussy force him to parent someone else's child. Brother-in-law calmly stated that it was either his way or the highway. Mother-in-law chose his way. This is the peak of the entitlement saga. Mother-in-law tries to kidnap the baby. So one day when mother-in-law was allowed to visit the baby, she is absolutely no help and demands to be catered to. My sister was very tired, the baby had colic that week, and she was run into the ground. Brother-in-law could not be home, and sis tried rescheduling, but mother-in-law was already on her way and was nearly impossible to stop. My sister said that she just handed the baby over to mother-in-law in the living room and sat on the couch. Big mistake. She had no idea when she dozed off, but sis must have dozed off for a little while after being up with a fussy child and being exhausted and dealing with postpartum issues. When she came to, neither mother-in-law or the baby were anywhere to be found. She looked for the baby frantically and called mother-in-law, but got no answer. She got in touch with brother-in-law, who drove home and picked her up. They went to mother-in-law's house to look for her. Father-in-law answered and said that he had not seen mother-in-law since she drove down to visit my sister, but her phone was on Find My Phone. They could track the phone from his device, as they were shared on the same cloud. Sure enough, within minutes, they could see the phone moving towards local hospital/lab area. It was a one-way road with a dead end. They hopped in the car to drive to the hospital. Sis found mother-in-law arguing with the hospital staff for not performing a medical procedure or test on a baby without the parents. Mother-in-law wanted to get a paternity test performed on the baby. She was detained by hospital security and the baby was taken into custody of the hospital, who thought she had kidnapped the baby. Sister and brother-in-law reached it just in time for the hospital to be calling the cops and trying to locate them. They had to show 10 different types of proof of identity and parentage to the staff before they were allowed to take their baby again. Brother-in-law threatened legal action against mother-in-law. Not sure what came of it. This happened years ago, but mother-in-law, brother-in-law, and my sister still have a strained relationship. The baby barely knows his grandmother, but has a quite close relationship with the grandpa, who visits often. Edit. I just wanted to add that many of you are debating whether she has borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder. I'm not sure. She's never been diagnosed, and even suggesting it would be like posting a wasp nest. I wanted to reach out to some of you who are sharing your own experience with these or loved ones who've had this happen. And I just wanted to say I'm sorry and I'm proud of you for doing so well. I hope things get better. For those of you who faced similar people, my sister says, find someone who will be your rock through it. Define boundaries and stick to them. Do not give in. Always stay skeptical and be vigilant around them. And I'm glad that my nightmare of a mother-in-law, having me running to the hospital in mismatched shoes with spit-up covered hair and clothes, is entertaining read for many people. Our final story is posted by Wonderfully Mindless. Entitled parents get kicked off a plane because the Wi-Fi isn't working. Hey everyone, I'm hoping this is the right place to put my story. If not, then thanks for listening anyway. I work for a major airline in the US, and as a flight attendant, this happened about 2 years ago. We were working a flight from Orange County to Denver, which is normally less than 2 hours. Important for later. I was the one at the front of the aircraft greeting passengers as they come aboard. The very first people to come on the plane for this particular flight was a family, 2 early teenage kids, their father, and a mother in a foot cast. They sit in the second row, and the rest of the boarding goes pretty normal. We even got the doors shut an extra 5 minutes early. We were all thinking about going down to the hotel bar at the end of this wonderfully uneventful day. As we pull away from the gate, I start making some normal announcements. You know, the ones that everyone actually pays attention to? When I say the Wi-Fi isn't working, honestly, it sucks when that happens, but there's literally nothing I can do about it. The mom rings the flight attendant call button, and that makes me realize my peaceful day is coming to an abrupt end. I ask her what's going on, and she begins telling me how she can't possibly be on a flight without Wi-Fi, how she has nothing to watch, and how she cannot handle being on this plane. I looked at her dumbfounded. This is a woman in her at least early 40s, sitting next to 2 children and her husband, who is freaking out about not having Wi-Fi for 2 hours. But of course, I don't point any of this out. I instead put on my best customer service smile and apologize for the inconvenience. She then starts crying, saying that she has to get off the plane right now. I ask her if she was totally sure she wanted to get off because we are still on the ground and it's still possible to go back, but it's a pain in the butt to return to the gate. As her sobs continue, I realize at this point that even if she wanted to stay, there was no way that I would feel comfortable with her at 40,000 feet. So I have another crew member call the pilots to explain what's going on. I let her know that we are going back and that she and her family can deplane. This This is the point where her wonderful husband decides to get involved. You would think that he would be consoling his wife, but he thought of a better idea and started yelling at me, screaming that she was going to be fine and that we didn't need to go back. How I was the one being dramatic and wasting everyone's time. After a very awkward taxi back to the gate, I go back to the front so that we can open the doors, and all the while the husband is alternating between cussing at me and yelling at his wife. Once we finally got the doors open, I head back to their row and ask them to deplane and offer to help them with their belongings. This is when the wife looked at me and smiles, and this is the part that I will never forget. "I'm going to just run in there and download a movie. I'll be right back." I just smiled at her and thought, you have to be kidding me. We finally get them off the plane and into the slightly confused hands of the ground supervisor. We quickly reclose the doors and I exchange a shocked glance with my crew. Who really thinks that they're going to be able to get back on the plane after you made them and 130 other passengers turn around because you couldn't spend 2 hours with your family without Wi-Fi? That's all the stories I have for today. Links to the original Reddit posts will be in the description box below. Please stop on by Reddit to show the OP some love and an upvote. If you enjoy my videos, please comment, like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell notification to let you know when I upload new videos. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.